Europe, we're singing. There's a missionary who shows up to one of our conferences. This was during our concerts. This was during the Cold War, the Iron Curtain. And the missionary had been caught trying to get literature into Eastern Europe. He said, they have my face right there posted. I can't go in anymore. Is there anybody in this glee club that will take Christian literature, smuggle it into behind the Iron Curtain? Well, I had a few weeks. I'm a college kid. Hey, we can't figure out how to... I can do it. And my friend and I will do it. We'll smuggle literature into... It sounded like a real good idea that night. But boy, you start heading toward a communist border with 1,500 Bibles in the back of your van, different thoughts occurred. And of course, my friend, we'd gone through this... The border guard met us, and the gate went up, and we went through, and he was just singing and praising, and we prayed. And he was so excited that we'd gotten all this literature through, and I said, that was the Austrians. You know, these are the Hungarians coming up. And sure enough, we go over the hill, and there's the barbed wire, and machine guns, and everything all lined out. You get out, every car behind us, everybody out, everything out. All the cars in front of us were the Volkswagen van, looking at the trunk go open, all the suitcases on the ground, going through jars this side. We have 1,500 Bibles in a Volkswagen van. The guy comes up to us, get out of the car, makes us go back to the engine, open up the engine, yes, engine, close, tells us to get out of the line and go through. We left every other car in line with all their stuff. Now, what did I do the next 3 summers? I smuggled literature into Eastern Europe. Probably 28 border crossings and different bands and different... Well, all I'm saying is, you get a window, go for it. Whatever it is. And now I have an opportunity when I worked in Moscow and Russia to have conversations because of what I did as just a post-college kid. And for me, it was a youth group. Get a youth group started in a little church that had no youth group, or whatever it is. Push the limits of what you can do in your ministry. Push the limits of what you can do in your education. So, first 2 do's. Do, take risks. Do, push the limits. The don't, my very first don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. Do you remember that list of businesses I had been encountered? About 6 or 8 of them. Every one of those was a business fail. You know, you always heard the story of Thomas Edison and all his great failures. We all think that's great. Oh, Thomas Edison, 100 failures before he found the right filament. But boy, we don't want to fail. I don't want to do anything that embarrasses me. I don't want to do anything. What if I try that degree and I don't make it? What if I try that ministry and it flops? What if I try... Hey, just try it. Failures, the one story I have is my CFO at Host. He had the opportunity to be the CEO of a small airplane manufacturing company, and he took it. It was going to be a missionary airplane, and he had an opportunity, and it was a long shot, but he took it. He was the CEO of a company that went bankrupt, and he was humiliated. I just drove this thing into the ground. And he finally caught on a job at Boeing. And he never wanted to tell anybody at Boeing that he was in the driver's seat of a company that went bankrupt. And finally it came up in a conversation where he finally kind of stammering, well, what'd you do before this? Well, yeah, I worked in... Well, what was your job? Finally he just had to come clean. I was the CEO of a company that went bankrupt. You know what the reaction was? You were a CEO. You ran your own company. Tell us about that. How does that work? What does that mean? What did you do? How'd you do it? All these guys buried in Boeing, they'll never get a chance to run their own company. Here's a guy who ran his own company. He said it was unbelievable. They didn't care. They were just thrilled that I had tried it. And so I thought, man, he said, hey, what was that like? You got caught with those Bibles, didn't you? What was it like? That doesn't diminish anything. Those business experiences. I learned from every one of those. My schooling, I learned from every one of my failures as well as my successes. So, please, take a risk, push the limits, don't be afraid to fail. And then I have 2 more don'ts. And these ones I have to back up a little bit. I've been pushing here. The last 2 don'ts. Don't go beyond your spiritual and emotional limits. Okay? I get real revved up here and I get you fired up and I get you going here. But the 2 cautions are, don't go beyond your own spiritual and emotional limits. For some people, trying too much or going too fast, you will go off the edge. Okay, you've got to know where that edge is for you. You've got to know what your tolerance for risk is. You've got to know what your tolerance for pain is. But find out what that point is and go right up as close as you can get. Don't go over. You've got to know yourself. This is where your friends and family are going to help. You're going to go to your friends and family and say, do you think I could try that? Or do you think I'll Do you think that would put me over? Do you think that's too much for me? Do you think that's too big a risk? Do you think I can handle that failure? So you do have to, as much as I want to motivate you and have you all go flying out of here and sign up for that MBA and that foreign mission project and all those kind of things, I want you to at least ask yourself honestly and ask the Lord, what are my emotional and spiritual limits? And Lord, protect me from going past it, because that is destructive. I want to go right up there, but I don't want to go past it. Some people are so afraid, getting to the ledge, they spend their whole life here. Of course, some people go flying off the ledge. You want to be right there where the action is. And the last one is, don't be deceived by the world's expectations. If you are going to be a high-impact Christian, you're going to be a target. You're going to be a target for Satan's temptations, Satan's attacks, Satan's criticisms. You're going to get shot at. If you're going to make a big difference for the kingdom, you're going to be a target for the enemy. So be careful. Be aware. I traded in the commodities industry at the go-go days of the 80s. If anybody read Masters of the Universe, I stood in the pits with people making hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. I watched what happened to their lives when you gave them money and power. It was pretty scary. And we have story after story of our own company where we allowed people to be so successful it destroyed them. And you're a target when you get out there and start having some success or making an impact or making a difference. And so you have to be ready for what Satan's attacks are. The thing that encourages me is that if you stay grounded in God's Word and grounded in Christian principles, that's going to protect you. I was talking to Ken about one of my favorite books. I think one of his is Good to Great. How many people have read Good to Great? How many people have heard of Good to Great? This department here is not doing their job. This is Jim Collins' book on what takes a company from good to great. Okay, I just wrote a book this last year using those good to great principles and applying them to Christian education. But here is what he found out about leadership, by the way. This is Jim Collins is a Stanford fellow. He had about 20 graduate students working on this. What he did was he took the companies over the last 50 years that outperformed their competitors by 3 to 1, and he came up with about a dozen, was it? A dozen and it was all statistical. These companies, over a long period of time, sustained remarkable growth above their peers. And it was just statistical. He said, okay, that's my good to great group. Now, what makes them so good? He went in and studied their leadership. He said it was so counterintuitive of what he had thought. The leadership books you read are Jack Walsh, Lee Iacocca, George Patton, those charismatic, strong, take charge types. He said, none of these companies have them. You know why? Those guys can make something happen like a battle, but nobody wants to follow them. Nobody wants to work for them. Jack Walsh fired a tenth of his company every year. He found who do these great companies end up working for? And he came up with a definition he called level 5 leadership. He had to come up with a name because he said there was no name for it. He said it didn't fit any other, it wasn't charismatic, it wasn't. In fact, let me just read, I'm just going to read from a paragraph of my book. John Maxwell, popular expert on leadership within the church, explains everything rises and falls with leadership. The good to great concepts recognize this as well. An organization or a school can only rise as high as its leadership allows.